Good afternoon, everyone. I pray that you've had another glorious Sunday, whether you went to church or you followed on the internet. Um, Today's reading is also uh, from the Epistle of St. Paul to the Ephesians and from the Gospel of St. Luke, according to St. Luke, that is. Um, Ephesians reading today is chapter 2, verses 14 through 22, and it talks about Christ being our peace. The gospel, however, talks about a rich person who thinks that stored money and stored grain that he has is his peace. That's the comparison between or the link between the epistle reading and the gospel reading today. So in the epistle reading, St. Paul says, Christ is our peace. He who has made us both one and has broken down the dividing wall of hostility by abolishing in his flesh the law of commandments and ordinances, that he might create in himself one new man in place of the two, so making peace. What's he talking about? What two men? He's talking about two men, and he created one man out of two. Well, he's talking about the demographics back then. There used to be two types of people, the Jewish people and the Gentiles, and there was a division between them. So in his incarnation, he aimed to create unity, to create one man instead of two. That's why in other places he says there is no Jew or Greek or so on. So through his incarnation, he created unity and among men. And through his resurrection, he created he reconciled us with God the Father. That's what he's talking about. And that's our true peace. Christ, who reconciled us to each other and reconciled us to God. The horizontal relationship and the vertical relationship with God. The horizontal with each other and the vertical with God. That's basically the epistle reading. However, in the gospel reading, in the gospel according to St. Luke, he says, Christ says, the land of a rich man brought forth plentifully, and he thought to himself, what shall I do, for I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this, I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is he who lays up treasures for himself and is not rich towards God? As he said this, Jesus called out, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. So it's a very interesting link between the epistle reading and the gospel reading. The epistle reading talks about peace being Christ himself. The gospel reading talks about peace as this rich man thinks being his possessions. And as he has so many possessions, he feels at peace and he feels he has enough to eat, drink, and be merry. And Jesus said to him, that today your soul will be required of you. So who's going to enjoy all of those possessions? So the lesson to get from those is that our peace is God, Christ. That is not to say it's not okay not to have some possessions. Actually, as Orthodox Christians, we need to have a minimum amount of possessions in order to exercise our freedom of choice that God gave us. If we have nothing, if we are destitute, we cannot exercise our freedom of choice. Even monks have some possessions. Nuns have some possessions. They have a room to sleep in. They have a bed. They have a table. They have books. There are minimum amount of possession or wealth that we need to have in order to exercise our privilege, which is freedom of choice. That is very important to understand. We have to have a certain amount of wealth in order to live and make Christian choices. That is not to say we need to have millions upon millions or billions upon billions to feel safe. We can have some money to make us feel independent of others, but at the same time, that is not our peace. Our peace is Christ Himself, who, through the horizontal relationship, united us together through His incarnation, that is, and through His resurrection, which is the vertical relationship with God, He reconciled us to His Father. That's what St. Paul says in the epistle. So it is very important to have both relationships, horizontal and vertical, horizontal with each other, vertical with God, so that we may have our peace. Now, these relationships might be turbulent. There might be issues. But we work hard to get them resolved. And God willing, they will be resolved. And that's our peace instead of our possessions. Okay, it looks like there are already some questions here. Yes, that's a good observation, Sharon. The horizontal and the vertical creates the relationships, creates the cross. Exactly, Alex. Ryan says, this passage also brings to mind the importance of the remembrance of death for me and for everyone. For everyone. We don't know when we are called to go home. We don't know when we are called to go home. So to rest on our laurels, like this rich man did, is the wrong thing to do. We need to keep our good fight going. We need to finish the race, as St. Paul says. And we need to be ready on a daily basis to go home. We need to prepare every day to go home, because we don't know when we are called to go home, as the rich man was called to go home. As he took his ease, he said, I have plenty of stuff. Eat, drink, and be merry. And that's when God told him, you fool, your soul will be required of you now. Welcome, Deacon Andrew. Sharon is saying the fact that the rich man said that he would tear down his smaller barns and build bigger ones shows wastefulness and ungratefulness. Absolutely. It would be better to keep the ones he has and share in his abundance. Absolutely. See, he isn't even a good businessman, because by the time he tears down his old barns and build other barns, which back then would take a long time, all the grain that he has, all the crops that he has would have been eaten by mice and rats and other critters. So neither would he benefit from it, nor would the needy. So as you suggested, Sharon, is exactly right. He can store some of it in his current barns and share the rest with those who are needy. This way, he at least helped others instead of just helping himself. That is exactly true, Sharon. Okay. Elizabeth says, so this passage does not teach against saving for retirement or a rainy day. Absolutely not. It does not. It does not teach against that. Nowadays, because everybody has bills, it's okay to save up. As I said earlier, it's okay to have a certain amount of wealth to survive. Okay? So we are given what we are given by God. We have to be wise like serpents. We can help others, but at the same time, we need to save up a little bit so that in the future, in case we get incapacitated, or in the future when we retire, we have sufficient amount so that we can retire with dignity. That is absolutely needed. But also, it is not restricted to physical wealth. It is also part of it is also helping others in other ways, not just financially, emotionally, mentally, with efforts, maybe to move. All of that is included in all of this wealth that is given to us, and we should share all of that. Let's see. Alex is saying the vertical and horizontal alignment can be implemented in corporate world as well as in the academic world, which creates the foundation for moving to the new earth, which is described in the book of Genesis. Absolutely. Absolutely. Our Christianity cannot be restricted to off hours. Our Christianity can be during work hours as well. As I mentioned so many times, we don't have to preach Christ with our lips. We can preach Christ by the way we behave, we carry ourselves, even at work. These, I believe, Anthony says, are examples of good stewardship. Exactly. That is exactly true. It is good to be rich above what we need because it allows us to sustain others through the church. Yes, absolutely. As we donate to the church, as we donate to others, our wealth increases. But that's not the goal. The goal is to help others. Yes, God will give us more many times if we help others, but that's not the goal. The goal is to help others, to be there for them financially, emotionally, mentally, in any way we can. Sarah is saying, so glad this will be reposted on YouTube because the internet reception in my area is totally dysfunctional, cutting in and out today. Okay, good, wonderful. Judy is saying, time, talent, and treasure. Absolutely. Actually, these are the 3 T's. Time, talent, and treasure. I add a 4th T. Time, talent, treasure, and technology these days. You can't live without technology. So if you have the gift of knowing technology, you can use that. You can donate that as well to the church and to others. Time, talent, treasury, and technology. So the 4 T's. Theodore is saying, if I remember correctly, St. John Chrysostom walked bare feet in the snow. He did not retire with dignity. Well, it depends on your calling. It depends on what God calls you to do. If you are called to do that, that's fine. There are monks and hermits that live at the top of the mountain and they barely have any clothing. They're called to do that. If you're not called to do that and you do it, you will not be successful. So all of us need to be living within our God calling to us. We cannot really compare ourselves to someone else because their calling might be different. And if we compare ourselves to someone else, we will always be sad. We will always be depressed. Because there is always someone who is better than us in something. I always give this example. It's a very clear example. I always give this example. Bill Gates has probably $120 billion now. Should he feel poor because Jeff Bezos has $200 billion? If he compares himself to Jeff Bezos, then he should feel poor. That's why comparing ourselves to others is not a good idea. Whether it is in wealth or in spirituality or in anything. So if somebody lived at the top of the mountain as a hermit and that's his calling, and it is not my calling, I shouldn't compare myself to him. I should live the best way I can within my calling from God. Does that make sense, Theodore? Okay. Who decides what dignity is anyway? Well, God does decide what is dignity. You see, God's image is in us, and we have to honor that. Our reply to God's image in us is to work hard to become like God. When we have God's image, which is a gift from God to all of us, we did nothing to get the image of God in us. God decided to give us for free His image, and the response, there has to be a response, that we become God-like. It's like an invisible umbilical cord between us and God when we work on acquiring His likeness, by acquiring the virtues. That's dignity. If we are enslaved not necessarily in a dungeon and tied up to a to something on the floor, and we can't walk, we can't eat, we can't see the light. Yes, that is enslavement, but we can be enslaved to money. We can be enslaved to a person. We can be enslaved to anything. That's not dignified life. If you don't have enough to survive on, and you have to beg on the street, if you truly don't have any money and you have to go beg on the street, okay, that is taking away from your human dignity. And that's why we help those people, not necessarily by giving them money, maybe by keeping in our cars non-perishable goods in bags and handing them to somebody who is on the street. If we give them money, sometimes that will backfire, because some of them have mental illness, some of them are addicted to drugs, some of them are addicted to gambling, and they will use this money the wrong way. But if we can afford them a good, decent meal, we are preserving their dignity. So dignity does not mean that I have servers. It does not mean that I have to drive the most expensive car and live in the most expensive house. That's not dignity. Dignity is the image of God in us, preserved, and even taken to the next step of becoming like God. Okay, wonderful. Makes perfect sense. He is the truly only opinion that matters. God's opinion. Yes, absolutely. Scott says comparison is the thief of joy. Yes, absolutely. I like that. Comparison is the thief of joy. There's one comparison that we can make. One. We don't compare ourselves to others, but we can compare ourselves to our potential. God gave us gifts, and we need to use them. Talents. We need to use them to the maximum. If we don't use them to the maximum, we can compare ourselves to our potential, which is the maximum, so that we can strive to get there. That is acceptable. What is not acceptable is comparing ourselves to others. So many are enslaved by this world without knowing. Absolutely. Absolutely. To money, to a title, to prestige. Yes, people can be enslaved to those, and they don't know it. Wonderful. It's not my definition, Ryan. I don't take credit for it. Yeah. This is the most important thing, is to have our dignity, which is preserving the image of God in us, and in response, working on becoming like God. Maintaining that invisible umbilical cord between us and God. And that can happen through prayer, through going to church, through all of these things that we have been talking about, through the virtues. It surrounds us, Sharon, especially in a land of abundant material riches. The evil one is having a field day. Absolutely. Anthony, that's why Jesus called the evil one the prince of this world. the prince of this world. Exactly. Any other questions? Let me make some announcements, reminders, as you think of other questions and type them up. As you may have heard, we have a project called Bless Thine Inheritance, documenting the history of DOMSE. The details are on domse.org, DOMSE.org. It's Bless Thine Inheritance. You can send pictures and videos according to the instructions on domse.org. Bless Thine Inheritance. Every church in the diocese needs to participate in this because every church is part of the history of this diocese. And since Sarah and Josh Reynolds are listening, please remind the faithful in your group to do the same. Maybe you can interview each other, talk to each other, take pictures, send them according to the instructions in domse.org. Because you are part of DOMSE, the newest addition to DOMSE. Okay, Father Antoon, God bless you. I wonder if Bill Gates has enough for his retirement. I don't know. 120 billion, probably enough for most of the world to retire. Please send in photos and video so your parish can be represented. Yes, actually Scott Strickland is the graphic designer of the video. So please send from all your churches. It's going to be a wonderful video and we're hoping to finish it by the winter retreat. And we will show it, God willing, if it's done, during the winter retreat. So Blessed Land Inheritance is the project. The winter retreat is being planned. It starts on January 29th and ends on January 31st. Please mark your calendars, and as soon as we send out the registration form, register yourself, your family, and encourage everybody in your parish to register. So the winter retreat is at the end of January. We're also planning the winter camp, but we're giving it a different name, but it is the same flavor. Since it is virtual, we're going to include this year only kids from 9 until 17 years old. Normally winter camp is 12 to 17, but since this year it is virtual, we're going to start at 9 to 17 years old. Only this year. God willing, next year we go back to in-person winter camp. And the winter camp is President Day weekend, February 12th through the 14th. February 12th through the 14th. Save the date flyer will be sent out on Monday after Thanksgiving. Registration will start on January 1st. So, Blessed Land Inheritance, Winter Retreat, the Winter Retreat on January 29th through January 31st. Please mark your calendars. And then Winter Camp, which is going to be called WAMP Out. It's an out of CST experience, since it is not face-to-face. And it is President Day weekend, February 12th through the 14th. Any questions? If you have any questions, please type them up. I'll give you a minute. Otherwise, we will end, and God willing, we'll see you next Sunday. So, 3 events coming up. December 4th is the deadline for Blessed Inheritance, the Blessed Inheritance project. Winter retreat, end of January, last weekend of January. The save the date flyer is already out. The winter camp, a special session of winter camp, is going to be President Day weekend, February 12th to the 14th. All right, God bless you, and we'll see you next Sunday. Take care. Bye bye.